You know, you can complain about system bloat all you want, but I guarantee you that you're going to be grateful for that increased damage dice when the time comes to beat someone over the head with a rulebook. So today, let's talk a little bit about the concept of system bloat and Pathfinder 2nd Edition on this episode of the Local Disaster Tour Guide. Hello travelers and tourists, my name is Mark and I am the Local Disaster Tour Guide. That's right, I am a storyteller who's here to talk about system bloat instead of reviewing system bloat. Because my Secrets of Magic book still hasn't come in the mail, Paizo. Listen, I know shipping problems happen, but I want my book. Welcome to a journey through the fantastic world of TTRPGs like Pathfinder and Starfinder. Today I'm going to be doing what, for now at least, is going to be a one-off discussion on the subject of system bloat and Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And I need to give a shout out here to one of the commenters on one of my videos from a couple of weeks ago. The commenter's name was Asurendra, at least I hope I said that correctly, and they were replying to one of my videos on the subject about the new playtest classes that Paizo is going to be playtesting here soon. At least as of the recording of this video, we still don't know what those playtest classes are, which means I can hang on to my absolutely foolish and illogical belief that the Witch Warper is jumping systems, at least for a little bit longer. But that video was kind of talking about what the possible classes could be, what direction Paizo might be going, and there was a lot of great comments down in the discussions, and Asurendra brought up a concern that I do hear mentioned from time to time when it comes to Pathfinder 2nd Edition, and that's the concept of system bloat. And if you've been playing RPGs for any length of time, you know that system bloat is a very real problem that happens with a lot of games, and given Paizo Publishing's incredibly ridiculous schedule of just how much content they're putting out, there is a very real fear in many portions of the community that Paizo may be rushing to a bloated system much faster than is wise or is good for the game. So today, I want to talk about that for a little bit. I want to give my thoughts on the subject, but really quick, I would like to highlight that this video is happening because of one of the comments that I got. Their comment kind of kicked this train of thought off for me and made me realize that, this is a topic that's worth discussing and something that I think the Paizoverse community should be thinking about. And so I really appreciate that they brought this issue up and it kind of led to the discussion we're going to have today. Now, normally I do all of the YouTube stuff at the end of my videos. If you enjoy the video, like the video, share it, subscribe to the channel, check out my Discord and my Patreon page. All that stuff is part of the business of being a YouTube content creator. And my personal philosophy is I prefer to present my content and then do the call to action. But one of the things I want to point out here is that it's not just business stuff. For me, the reason I do the channel, this is a side hustle for me. And really, the main reason I'm here is I enjoy talking gaming with all of you. So when you leave comments, when you come to my Discord community and chat with me about video ideas there, when you participate in these discussions, you're actually helping these conversations to grow. And it's more than just pleasing the algorithm. It's actually helping me as a content creator recognize the things that are worth talking about and worth doing with this channel. So, to everyone who does the YouTube stuff, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, and it contributes on more than just a business level. It actually brings value to these conversations, and I appreciate each and every one of you that is a part of supporting this channel. But, sappy YouTube appeals aside, let's get started. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to define what bloat even is. And while I think that this is a subject that a lot of people in the gaming community are aware of, it's also one of those things that I think can be a little bit hard to define. It's one of those, like, you know it when you see it, but identifying exactly what bloat is can be tricky sometimes. So for this video, I'm going to try to use a simple definition, though if I'm being honest, I'm not even sure right now if this is an adequate definition. For me, system bloat is when a game grows to the point that the size of the game becomes a factor in the enjoyment of that game. And I want you to notice I'm being neutral in the definition I hear. The size of the game affects the enjoyment of the game. It could be good, it could be bad, we'll talk about that here in a moment. But I do think that that is probably the best working definition that I can come up with, at least for the moment. Game developers very naturally want to add on to their products. Over time, they create more and more content for their games, and eventually the amount of that content becomes a consideration in how enjoyable that content is for the consumer. It's like binge watching shows on Netflix. If you wanted to binge watch Cobra Kai, you could probably do that in a couple of weeks if you needed to. But if you wanted to binge watch Supernatural, that's going to take a while. The sheer amount of content becomes a factor that you have to consider in determining whether or not you even want to engage with that content. And while we're on the subject of definitions, I'm going to go ahead and make what may be the most controversial statement in this entire video, but this is something I do think is kind of healthy for this discussion, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a bloated game. In fact, I would argue that Pathfinder 2nd Edition was bloated when the core rulebook first dropped. It's been a while since I went back and watched this video, so I'm hoping it's still on YouTube. I'm going to go try to find it for you guys, but there was a video that came out when Pathfinder 2e first launched, where a person went through and mathematically calculated how many viable first-level characters you could make in Pathfinder 2nd Edition using the ABC's Ancestry, Background, and Class in just the core rulebook. Now mind you, viable characters, not necessarily optimized characters. If I can find it, I'll try to throw the video link up here. But when he ran his calculations, he discovered that Pathfinder 2e could create multiple, unique, viable first-level characters for every single person on the planet. This game launched with more viable character options than will ever be played in the history of the game, and that is before a single book was added to the core rulebook in Pathfinder 2e's product line. So let's just go ahead and say, if 2e's content is that deep, we're already dealing with a bloated system. Now, I fully expect to get some pushback on that particular point, and I understand some of the arguments that might be coming from the other side, but let me just go ahead and say, if you haven't caught it already, that one of the main ideas of this video is bloat is not always a bad thing. And I think it's helpful if we pause and realize that bloat is kind of the nature of the beast when it comes to game publishing and game development. I mean, on a fundamental level, in order for game designers to stay in business, they have to keep publishing books and making content for people to buy so that they can pay their employees and pay their bills. If the only thing that Paizo ever published was the core rulebook, we would have a very solid game that I definitely enjoy, but I guarantee you that Paizo would go out of business and support for that game would diminish extremely quickly. To stay open, they have to keep making content that we can consume. And that's just a bare bones basic business level understanding. There's more to it than just the business side of the equation. TTRPGs represent a very unique hobby and a very unique form of entertainment because of the incredible possibility of this style of entertainment. There's even a form of play for TTRPGs called Theater of the Mind. It is a reference to the idea that as long as you can dream it up in your mind, you can do it inside of an RPG. And that's one of the best things about the hobby. If you and I go to the movies, we have no control over how that particular form of entertainment plays out. Well, maybe Sonic the Hedgehog proves we have some control. Anyways, when my wife and I go to watch the next Marvel movie in theaters, if we don't like where the plot is going halfway through, we can't call a timeout and tell the director to refilm the movie and make it what we want to make it. We're kind of stuck going along with the ride of whatever that director and that cast came up with for that movie. And it's the same thing with TV shows. It's the same thing with books. Those forms of entertainment are very much confined to whatever has been produced. We have to consume it in that form. Now, there are certainly forms of entertainment where we have more control. A good example of that would be video games. We have much more liberty about what we do and how we interact with that particular form of entertainment, but even then, there's always going to be constraints inside of the game that say you can only go so far. But tabletop RPGs don't have that restraint. If you have the imagination for it, and your gaming group is interested in doing it, you can go anywhere, you can do anything, you can tell any kind of story. It's one of the greatest things about this hobby, but it also, let's be honest, kind of leads to system bloat. If you have a form of entertainment that can cover this gigantic array of potential stories, you also have a form of entertainment that's going to have a gigantic need for ways to do those stories. And there will always be a balancing act in RPGs, regardless of how simple or mechanically complex those games are, where publishers and gamers are trying to find the right balance between mechanical support for the different types of stories we want to tell and making the game accessible to people who might be experiencing our hobby for the first time. So I think it's important to realize we're always going to have system bloat with any RPG out there. Yes, Pathfinder 2nd Edition is a bloated game, and at the rate that Paizo is producing content for Pathfinder 2e, that bloat is only going to increase. But the reality is, every published game out there that has any kind of support whatsoever is also experiencing system bloat. Maybe that bloat occurs at a different speed for different games, but it's happening all across the gaming community. Instead, I think the focus of the conversation and where a healthier concern might lie is distinguishing between good and bad system bloat. The collective weight of all of the mechanical systems inside of a game might be quite immense and still function really well and be reasonably accessible to new players, while at the same time a game that has less bloat overall may have inherited a particular mechanical flaw that makes the game much less fun to play. Sometimes bloat doesn't hurt a game, other times bloat can hurt a game. Let me offer an example. If you're a fan of this channel, you've probably heard me say more than a few times that I'm not a big fan of the investigator class in Pathfinder 2e. I really don't think that it was necessary for the game. I don't come to Pathfinder or other fantasy RPGs for investigator-style characters, and I feel like investigator would have been better as an archetype in 2e, or maybe have some subclass support in 2e. I didn't feel like Paizo needed to publish an entire investigator class just for Pathfinder 2nd Edition. The investigator is, hands down in my mind, system bloat. The game didn't need it. Heaven help me with all the investigator fans who are leaving replies right now. But even if I don't think investigator was necessary for Pathfinder 2nd Edition, one thing I can say is investigator has not hurt the game. Sure, I don't think it needs to be here, but it hasn't really harmed the game in any way. Investigator is just a class that I really don't care for, and I don't have any players who particularly care for it, and so it's probably never going to see the light of day at one of my gaming tables. But the existence of the investigator doesn't hurt the game. So even if I don't care for it, it's not necessarily a bad thing. On the other hand, you can have bloat that very clearly harms the game. And for an example of this, I'm going to jump over to the custom lineage rules from Tasha's Cauldron of Everything in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I don't follow D&D 5e nearly as closely as I follow Pathfinder 2nd edition, but I have seen several conversations around the custom lineage rules complaining that the custom lineage rules have completely invalidated certain racial choices in D&D 5e. It's just clearly mechanically superior to use custom lineage over some of the other racial options inside of that game. Now again, I don't follow 5e super closely, so I don't know how bad this problem is, but I have seen some evidence, and it does look like when Wizards of the Coast added that to the game, they inadvertently caused problems with some of their previous material. And before we go too far, let me make an important point. Wizards of the Coast had a good reason to put custom lineage rules in their game. In Pathfinder 1e, Paizo published the Advanced Races Guide, and I use that book all the time to come up with unique options for my players. The concept of being able to build your own race or build your own ancestry is an engaging mechanical option to put inside of an RPG. There is a legitimate story reason to have this kind of rule set. But in 5e, the implementation of the custom lineage rules ended up causing some problems. And as a result, that makes custom lineage a good example of how System Bloat, even well-intentioned System Bloat, can become problematic for a gaming system. So what I want to do for the rest of this video is I want to talk about the 3 ways I think that System Bloat can become problematic, and ask the question, is Paizo headed that direction, or what do we need to watch out for, or how can we address these problems if they occur? Okay, so the first way that System Bloat can become problematic is one that I think is very relevant to the conversation surrounding Pathfinder 2e, and it's what I'm going to call content exhaustion. And it's basically the point when a game system gets so big that it can be exhausting trying to dig into that content and approach that content and do anything with that content. I'm currently playing through Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, which makes use of Pathfinder 1e rules, and in that game, you can play 25 different potential classes, and each of those classes has at least 5, if not 6, variant classes that you can also play. That means if you look solely at character customization through the lens of your class choice, there are well over 100 options inside of the game. And if I'm being honest, it's a lot. It's kinda hard. If you're not familiar with Pathfinder 1st Edition rules, and thankfully I had like 10 years worth of experience with that, I could very easily see how that mountain of options would be exhausting to try and figure out. And Pathfinder 2e is producing content very quickly. We have the base classes in the core rulebook, and then we had 4 new classes in the APG. We have 2 new classes in Secrets of Magic, 2 more new classes coming with Guns and Gears, and then 2 more classes that are about to be playtested. That is a lot of content, and I've only discussed classes. There is a legitimate complaint that a new player might have that it's kind of hard to approach a game when there is so much in the game that you don't even know where to begin. Now, there are a number of different ways to handle content exhaustion, and I don't have time to dive into all of those, but to take Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous from Owlcat Games, one of the things they do when you load up that game is they have several pre-built characters that you can just load up the game select a character that they've already made, drop into the game. It has a pre-built progression for level ups that you can just turn auto level up on, and you can just go into the game, play the game, and let the game take care of the mechanical side of play, and you don't even have to worry about digging through all that mess. It's a very intelligent design choice for players who might not be familiar with the system. Setting out some pre-built options in front of players allows people to approach that video game and start playing immediately and get some experience with the game before they ever have to stop and figure out, how do I want to build a character? And this is something that the TTRPG community can copy in a way. Paizo does it with the Pathfinder beginner box. Here are some pre-made characters. Here is a pre-made adventure. You can be a brand new game master with a brand new group of players and have a complete functioning game assembled for you, and then once you have some experience, you can go back and play with those components and create something unique to your table. By the same token, one of the things I recommend as a game master is if you are inviting someone who is brand new to RPGs. This doesn't necessarily apply to experienced players from other systems, but if you're talking to someone who is brand new to RPGs and they want to try Pathfinder or any other game for that matter for the first time, I recommend don't have them roll up a character. Ask them what kind of character they want to play, talk to them a little bit, ask them some clarifying questions, maybe give them one or two options, and then build a character for them, present them that character, let them play that character for a few weeks, and then once they have a grasp of the game, say, hey, would you like to go back and build this character yourself so you can make it your own? One of the best ways to address content exhaustion is functionally to funnel the content so that new players experience that content little bits at a time so they have a chance to learn it as they go. So when it comes to content exhaustion, it can be a serious problem, but I think it's a manageable problem as long as game publishers and gaming groups take steps to help people not be overwhelmed with the amount of content available. Overall, at least for the moment, I feel like Paizo is doing a good job here. But I will say this is definitely an area where it takes consistent thought and deliberate effort in order to make sure that content exhaustion doesn't become an overwhelming problem. Now, the second kind of problem that you can get with System Bloat is what we can simply call low quality content. It's when a game developer begins to rush their content or move through content so quickly that the content just isn't well done. I'm sure there's more than a few World of Warcraft players who could probably comment on this exact problem. I actually remember the precise moment that I knew Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 edition was dying. I knew D&D 4e was coming. I knew that Wizards of the Coast was done with the 3.5 product line. And that moment was this book. This is D&D 3.5's Cityscape, an essential guide to urban adventures. I'm not going to bother reviewing this book for the channel or talking too much about this book. Let me just tell you, this is easily one of the worst RPG books I have ever bought. If you've seen any of my RPG reviews, you may notice that I frequently tell you, always try before you buy. Always read the product for yourself before making a purchase decision. And Cityscape is one of those books that taught me that lesson. I remember buying that book, taking it home, opening it, and being... I don't even know if there's a word for the emotion I felt, but just the colossal disappointment at the quality of material in that book relative to the other things that Wizards had published up until that point. It was going to be a while before they announced D&D 4e, but in that exact moment, I knew it was coming because I knew that Wizard had stopped caring about the quality of the material they were putting out. And I think it is a natural temptation for publishers to put out low quality content. Produce quick, produce fast, get it out in front of people, let them buy it up. We don't care about the quality, we care about the sale. And there's really not much more to say on this point beyond just you want to keep an eye on any company, any gaming system to make sure that as the system grows, that the quality of that system is being maintained, that the publisher is not putting out low quality content. Now, I will say of Paizo, so far, they're pretty serious about their playtest system and putting out content that has received significant review from the people who are going to be playing that content. That may be one of the safest and smartest safeguards against low quality content. Thorough community playtesting does help prevent this problem, so for the moment I feel like Paizo is doing reasonably well here. But by far, I think the most damaging type of system bloat is what I'm going to call invalidating system bloat. And this particular type of bloat goes by another common name. You've probably heard it referred to as power creep. Essentially, the idea here is, as a system grows, new content may be released that is, honestly, mechanically superior in every important way to previously released content. This is what I was referencing when I talked about custom lineage earlier in D&D 5e. In the rush to put out content that gamers are interested in, if you aren't careful about how that content is constructed, you can create a situation where the new content is very clearly superior to the older content, and if you take two players and one of them is using the older content and the other one is using the newer content, the player using the newer content is going to have a better time because they are using the superior content. Balancing the content inside of the game and preventing power creep over the life of the game is a very difficult challenge. And if I'm being honest, I've never seen a game that 100% manages to avoid this. I remember in Pathfinder 1st Edition, when the Oracle class originally came out, most of my players lost interest in playing a cleric. Now, the problem wasn't super extreme at that point. That was still fairly early in 1E's existence, but I noticed that the options that they gave the Oracle were quite often a lot more engaging for my players, to the point that very few of my players actually decided to roll up clerics after that class released. Later on in 1st Edition, the Magus class came out, and when the Magus class came out, basically no one wanted to play a wizard. Ever. Like, mechanically speaking, for the first several levels of the game, there is no reason to play a wizard over a Magus in Pathfinder 1st Edition, and it's not until later levels of the game that wizards really begin to make up the difference. And I know some players who would argue that they don't make up the difference in 1st Edition. But if I want to take the story of Pathfinder 1st Edition even farther, when the Arcanist class came out late in 1E's life cycle, they actually ended up releasing a wizard archetype called the Exploiter Wizard that drew a bunch of the Arcanist abilities over to the wizard class, and to me it kind of felt like a tacit admission on Paizo's part that the Arcanist was superior to the wizard, if not in every way, in most of the ways that actually mattered. As new content is added to a game, you can very easily create situations where the new content invalidates older content, and that is very frustrating, not just because a new player may not realize what content has been invalidated, but also if you have paid for that content, it's frustrating for that content to functionally no longer be usable. Why should I pay for a book if a publisher is going to release another book 2 years from now that makes this book completely pointless? This is where I think system bloat is truly its most destructive on any RPG. This is a problem that all RPGs suffer from. I have never seen an RPG that managed to avoid this. And I think there's this weird, I don't even know how to describe it, psychological loop in a game's life cycle that even kind of naturally pushes for invalidating content. That desires power creep even though we know that power creep is bad for the game. Simply put, it's fun to get new, powerful options. When you open up a book and see a new option and realize, oh my, this option is going to be so strong, it's going to bring so much to the game, I can do so much with this, that's exciting. It's fun to find those things. And when I see those things pop up in published materials for a game, I'm more interested in buying those materials because I'm more interested in using those materials. By the same token, publishers might naturally want to power creep a little bit because that keeps the excitement level higher for new products. Over the life cycle of any game, you're going to have a natural diminishing return when it comes to sales, but as long as excitement is high, you can offset those diminishing returns and keep the income for your business strong. And yeah, it's a shortcut and an unhealthy shortcut, but I can see why it might be tempting for a publisher to naturally want to do that. And usually power creep doesn't happen all at once. It usually plays out over a very long period of time, happening in small doses here and there, to the point that you don't realize power creep has occurred until you are quite a ways down the road and you compare what is coming out today to what happened several years ago. That's what makes power creep so devastating. You don't even realize it's happening until you've already kind of gone too far. And this is where we have to ask what is truly the hardest question of this video. Is Paizo experiencing not just system bloat, but power creep? Is Paizo inadvertently developing a game where 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to look back down the road and realize that the game has drifted to the point that older content is invalidated, resulting in an unhealthy game? Now, if I'm being honest here, this is probably a question where everyone is going to have different answers. The pace of publishing that Paizo is doing right now is absolutely crazy. I'm kind of amazed that they have managed to do everything that they have done in the relatively short life cycle that 2E already has. They are cranking out content like crazy. And if I'm being honest, I do have some fears as a consumer of this game that they are inadvertently going to power creep over the life cycle of the game. Now, so far, I think they have mostly avoided this problem. Earlier, I told you the story of some of the classes that they used in first edition that invalidated previous classes. I talked about how the Oracle caused a lot of my players to not want to play clerics. The Oracle has been out for a while now in Pathfinder 2E, and I have not seen that conversation happen. In fact, if I'm being honest, most of my players actually prefer the cleric over the Oracle in 2E 9 times out of 10. So, Paizo dodged that bullet. And I'm still waiting on Secrets of Magic, but the online conversations that I've seen around the Magus, people seem to be excited about the class, but I haven't seen a lot of people trying to make the argument, oh, I'll never play a wizard again, this is clearly superior. I haven't had a chance to dive into the class the way I would like to, but initial impressions from the conversations I've seen, it does seem like Paizo has dodged that bullet so far. I'm not going to lie, I'm very worried about the gunslinger. There are a lot of people who think that the fighter class is arguably the strongest class in Pathfinder 2E. I don't know if I'm in that camp, but I do know that camp exists, and I do know they have a pretty strong case. And if I'm being honest, I'm kind of worried about some of the design decisions that Paizo is making for the gunslinger, because I'm worried that they may accidentally produce a class that is even stronger than the fighter, and if they do, I'm a little worried that that could tip the scales of the game. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but if I'm being honest, it is something I'm concerned about. I have a natural hunger, a natural desire for more content from Paizo. I want all of these incredible things that they are designing and making. I want to keep adding to this game that I love, But at the same time, I do have this fear that in the process of adding to the game, Paizo may inadvertently cause the ship to start taking on water when the balance is thrown off. I don't know if I have a great answer here. As I said on the previous point, I do think that Paizo's playtesting system is healthy because it gives a lot of community feedback, and I think that that is going to go a long way in helping preserve Pathfinder 2e over the course of its life cycle. And I do think that the internal math to Pathfinder 2e is very well designed, and I think that that helped guards against power creep in a way. But I also know that this is one of the most universal problems in game design. So there's a part of me that kind of wonders, not if there will be power creep, not if there will be invalidating content, but rather when power creep, when invalidating content becomes part of this game. For the health of their game, I hope Paizo keeps up the good record that they've had going so far. Given the pace of the content Paizo has put out, I think that, at least so far, they have done a good job of adding to the system without actually harming the system. And it does seem like the company has some procedures in place that lend to the long-term health of the game. Will that hold? I certainly hope so. I love this game and I want to see it be a success. But I also think that it's good for the Pathfinder community to be having these conversations and to be keeping an eye on these topics, because if we want Pathfinder 2e to be the best game that it can be, we do need to keep a critical eye on the kind and quality of content that is being produced. But those are just some of my thoughts on the subject of System Bloat and Pathfinder 2e. If you all are interested in diving into this topic a little bit more, let me know. I would be willing to revisit this topic later if there is an interest in this discussion, but for now, let me throw the conversation to you. What are your thoughts on System Bloat and Pathfinder 2nd Edition when it comes to System Bloat? Do you agree that Pathfinder 2e is a bloated game? And if it is bloated, is that bloat harming the system? Do you think the amount of content is good? Or do you think that the amount of content is starting to hurt Pathfinder 2e? And do you think the pace that Paizo is publishing new content is ultimately beneficial or harmful to the game? I appreciate all of your feedback, and I look forward to the comments that I'll be getting on this video. And I guess I'll do the YouTube stuff real quick. If you enjoyed this video, like it, share it, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, do all of that stuff that feeds the algorithm, but more importantly, inspires me as a content creator. And if you're interested in my Discord or my Patreon, I have links to those in the video description as well. Thank you so much for being a part of the conversation, and have a wonderful day.